250 years ago, when the town of Cornwall was divided up by the original proprietors, the lot down the hill from what is now my home was taken by one Jacob Scoville. He felled trees and built a farm on the steep, rocky hillside. That farm has passed through 5 generations of Scovilles, and today is farmed by Ralph and Thalia Scoville and their son Fred. The early Yankee farms of the Connecticut hills were largely self-sufficient. The men not only plowed, harvested, milked cows, and cut firewood, but also had to serve as their own carpenters, masons, blacksmiths, and harness makers. The women conducted a range of home industries, which included spinning, carding, weaving, making cheese and butter, salting down pork and beef, and manufacturing tallow candles and soap. Connecticut agriculture has gone through several revolutions since then. Today, a farmer's clothes and a farmer's food are likely to be little different from their non-farming neighbors. But in Ralph Scoville's time and his father's time, the traditions of the self-sufficient farm household still lingered on. In 1927, when Ralph Scoville first started working on the Scoville farm, the tractor had not supplanted the horse, and herbicides had not replaced the painstaking, unmechanized cultivation of the soil.
Weed control was your biggest thing. You used to plant the corn, in there, and you'd mark it with a marker, and then you had one horse would plant this row, you'd plant the next row, and you had to keep cultivating it all the time to keep the weeds down. Cultivate. I wish I'd had a nickel for every mile I'd gone on a horse cultivating. Oh, your kids used to get thrown right on the horse. All right, Bub, take off. You took the horse down this end, you turned around and went back up the other end. All day long.
Farmers still made many of their own tools, often using local materials, including some unexpected ones.
Now, you remember that your grain all was harvested. You did cut it with a cradle and put it in shocks, and then they'd pile it in the barn, and then they'd thrash it. Well, before the thrashing machines came around, they'd have a long handle. It was probably 4 feet long, and then there was a short piece like a cop's billy club, about the length of that. All right, it had an elongated eye in the handle part. All right, then they had to have a hinge point. So what did they use for those? They would take eel skins. They would last the longest, and they were the toughest.
Thrashers weren't the only use the Scoville farm found for the eels that teemed in nearby Cream Hill Lake.
I remember seeing Father skinning an eel, and because it's good eating. You cut it up into sections, and they're good. It's all nice meat. And that was one way they made use of the eels.
Other wild foods contributed to the family diet as well. Maple syrup and honey provided sweeteners. Many farmers hunted and fished, and most raised food for the family to eat. Small-scale local industries helped process that food. Fred Bate, a retired Cornwall butcher, remembers smoking and curing hams for the town's farmers.
They'd bring them in, and we'd cure them and smoke them for, well, my dad, penny a pound. First he cut up the pigs. He cured the hams, the shoulder, and the bacon. He smoked the hams and the shoulders and the bacon. He made the sausage, and he rendered the lard.
And the farmers grew grain and had it ground at a local water-powered mill.
They had a grain grinder. There was a wheel in there, a stone. They used to grind it in a conveyor belt, or a little with paddles on it, buckets on it. You took it all the way up to the top, and then when you wanted it, you just put something under it, pull this handle, and there the flour came out, or whatever it was rather coarse, but it came out into your buckets. It was oats and buckwheat and whatever you wanted ground. They take to those places, you take the seed in bags and bring back your grain, your ground up.
I knew that early Connecticut farmers had made and drunk inordinate amounts of hard cider. They even drank it in church. I asked Ralph Scoville about cider.
You talk about cider. You seen this wall from over here from the yellow barn? It's a nice wall. That was all built on hard cider.
And what do you mean?
That's what I mean. That's what they were paid in hard cider. Because a man will work harder for a bottle of booze than he will for $1 any day.
A lot of the cider, Ralph Scoville told me, went for vinegar.
They had to have this mother, what they call mother, in the cider to make it turn to vinegar. Well, I've heard them tell about putting brown paper in certain for it to kind of work on or something, as a catalyst or whatever you call it. And then they took it upstairs, put it in where it was warm up there. And that's where they call it the vinegar room. That's where they kept it. And then of course they bottle it off or keep it in the. But they used lots of vinegar in those days.
Besides food, the farm families produced their own medicines.
You had the flax seed. You see, they used to use the flax seed for poultices, for drawing. So you had an abscess. Well, you've heard of mustard plasters. Well, they used the same thing. It made flaxseed poultices and put them on, and it was supposed to draw the fever and inflammation out of things.
The farm even produced its own fuel.
all your wood and stuff was all cut with the axe and crosscut saws, 8-foot lengths. You split them, chop a whole tree down 8-foot lengths, split them with wedges so you could carry them, and burned all wood all together around here.
Farm families produced not only much of their food and fuel, but also much of their clothing.
They had most all of them had sheep, so there you got your wool for your jackets and your socks and your blankets and what else.
They had a shearing once a year. Then the women of the farm processed the wool.
They had to be all washed and get that grease out of it. And then they had to comb it all and then get it straightened out. And then they put it on that spinning wheel thing and get it to make the thread out of it. See, they had to get all those. You had to feed all those little the hair on the wool is say 4 inches long, whatever it was. You had to get so many of them up, and you had to feed them into that, make that little rope and yarn in order to do it. And of course, it's quite a task to do that. And then you knit it. They had these looms, and they put the stuff in there. You know, there's so many threads, and that thing goes. You pull it back, and then you run the shuttle through, and you push it through again. And you make what you want for your cloth. That's where all your little clothes came from.
Indeed, Yankee preacher Horace Bushnell aptly dubbed the era of self-sufficient Connecticut farming the age of homespun. Commemorating the centennial celebration of Litchfield County in 1851, he also noted, 100 years from now, everything that was most distinctive about it will have passed away. If Connecticut was once known as the land of steady habits, indeed as a bastion of Yankee conservatism, that reputation was based largely on traditions that went back to the age of homespun. Indeed, as the state became increasingly industrial, and even its farmers became entrepreneurs, the mythic past of self-sufficient farm families continued to shape its identity. A study of Litchfield County farmers written in the 1940s noted that independence and self-reliance were highly important traits in the early years of the settlement. In the self-sufficient economy, hard work and plenty of it was the rule. A natural corollary of this self-reliance was individualism. And they observed that, to a surprising degree, the central value structure erected on the colonial agricultural subsistence base has endured. Our society is still debating today to what extent the values of the age of homespun remain appropriate in the age of the high-tech computer and the multinational corporation.